Hey, welcome to the Modscast. Back in the country. Got a lot to talk about, obviously, Charlottesville. A little bit angry, um, as everybody is, but probably not for the same reasons most people feel like they should be. Um, there's a couple videos I'm going to put links to. One about the Boston Free Speech Rally yesterday, the 19th, and then a couple on, and then one on Charlottesville and the legal responsibilities of the people who are in charge, because that's one of the problems that I'm having. And then two to my blogs. I was out of the country, so I did some blogs. So a lot of what I say in here will be contained in the blogs, but it'll be in more detail. So, first of all, look, neo-Nazis, racists, they're freaking idiots, okay? I mean, they're evil idiots, and they're a fringe. They are really a fringe. And there's not that many of them. There's just not. Douglas Murray said a while back, the world's suffering from a shortage of Nazis. And what Murray means by that is that people are screaming Nazi everywhere where there aren't Nazis. They're just trying to create Nazis so that they can have windmills to tilt at, have something to attack. But remember, the Nazi ideology, come on, the whole world knows how evil it is. Only fringe idiots are going to be subscribing to it. That's his point. He's not saying that we need Nazis. He's saying that people are looking for Nazis everywhere. And they're looking for them on the right, most of the time. So, that's his point. But attacking Nazis and branding people Nazis has been the device of communists for a long time. Now, those guys actually were Nazis. There's no doubt about it. They're claiming those things, okay. So it's clearly they're wrong, okay? But being wrong and shouting something, for a while back when Spencer got punched, Richard Spencer, who's again a deplorable racist, this thing started, is it okay to punch a Nazi? And the answer is unequivocally no. It's not okay to punch a Nazi, okay? It's not okay to punch somebody unless they're punching you, in the process of punching you. And they can be shouting the most obscene things in the world, and they're still not in the process of punching you. Okay? Words and ideas are not violence. You need to remember that. It's really important. That's what distinguishes us from savages, as my blogs will dictate. Now, I don't need to get into Trump and all this, but, you know, increasingly, the way that this thing's being blown up and the double standard, okay? I don't mind people being wrong. What I hate is hypocrisy and double standards, and more than anything, I hate it when the rule of law is not being followed. All right, so what I'd like to do, and I'm going to try and draft one, is start an online petition to our elected officials that says, look, we will solve our problems peaceably, but when we can't, your job is to keep us apart from one another. That's your job, to defend not neo-Nazism. We don't pay you to do that. We don't need you to do that, okay? Because we're all smart enough to reject shitty ideas. And those of us who persist in shitty ideas will continue to be marginalized. And they'll have their little space to cry, but nobody's going to pay them any attention or give them any power. Okay? The job of law enforcement is to keep them separate. As I note in my blog, okay, in 1979, the neo-Nazis wanted to demonstrate in Skokie, Illinois, which was populated by Jewish people largely, and had, I think, 5,000 survivors of Holocaust camps, of concentration camps, excuse me. You want to talk about incendiary? If I had survived one of those camps and you were going to march through there with Nazi symbols, I'd sure as hell want to beat the crap out of you or shoot you. They wanted to start something, more so than these guys with tiki torches at the statues did. And I'm not excusing them for their racist stuff, okay? But the idea that these guys were looking for a fight, so that's different. The Supreme Court ruled that the neo-Nazis could demonstrate in Skokie, that they had the right to do it. Okay? And that was their decision. Because all ideas, however odious, are free to be expressed. Freedom of expression is there. It's the most important thing. Freedom of speech. And I'm sorry, but hate speech is free speech. Because it's not doing violence to you. You don't have the right not to be offended in a free society. You can't. As Douglas Murray said, the only society worth living in is one where your deepest held beliefs can be trodden upon. It's why we have a problem with fundamentalist Islam in Western free societies. Because in this society, you can put a crucifix in a jar of piss and get a bunch of money for it. get a grant from the government for it or whatever. Which offends a lot of Christians, but guess what? That's a free society. And anybody who would try to stop that by violent means would be wrong. Okay? So, no matter what, that's it. And law enforcement, their job, and this is what we need to ask them to do. Okay? Because too many of them are falling apart. And this thing was horrible. What happened here was, you want to shut down and separate the white racists and disperse their protests. Okay, first of all, they had a permanent protest. I don't agree with any of their ideas, but they had a permanent protest. Okay. Then when you get rid of them, let me go back a second. In Skokie, they didn't end up doing it in Skokie. They ended up doing their demonstration in Marquette Park in Chicago. About 1,000 white supremacists showed up. There were some 2,000 counter-protesters who were detained and kept separate by police so that violence did not happen. The police did their job. Now, those police did not want to help neo-Nazis. In fact, most of them probably wanted to punch the idiots in the face, but they didn't. Because like the police always do, they did a job nobody wants to do, and they kept them separate. They protected their right to free speech, which is their job. Our job is to work out the ideas in a free society. Our job is to have the battlefield of ideas and let ideas that are shitty, like neo-Nazism and racism and all that crap, okay, get beaten by sheer osmosis of good ideas. In other words, osmosis isn't the right word, but the spread of good ideas, which will choke out like weeds, which will choke them out. People are like, oh, but we can't believe we're still fighting the racist fight. Look, there's going to be idiots. We told you this. I've told you this. There's going to be idiots. It takes time, lots of it, and bad ideas will persist. Why? Because evil doesn't go away. And when they're violent, you return violence, but you do not initiate violence ever. Okay. So their job was to keep them separate. They failed to do that, and in fact, not only did they fail to do that, when they ordered them to disperse, they channeled them through an area which was full of anti-protesters, creating violence. This is similar, and you'll see this in the video about Boston at the free speech rally. Okay, it is appalling. It was a free speech rally. The people were very clear on their website, the people hosting it, that they rejected racism, Nazism, white supremacy, etc. But for all that, the media portrayed it as this right-wing event. And as a result, I think they said anywhere from 20 to 40,000 counter-protesters showed up. And there were maybe a couple dozen free speech people who had the courage to show up. And if you watch that video, and I encourage you to watch the whole thing about Boston, because it is appalling the way these people were treated. Appalling. Okay? People getting spit in the face, an old woman being dragged and wounded, okay? And them being labeled Nazis, okay? And they're not Nazis. They have nothing to do with Nazis. They have everything to do with free speech. And this mob is accusing them of all this stuff. This mob that has been incited by social media and all of the nonsense and hysteria, okay, treats them like shit. That is completely unacceptable. And will you hear about it in the mainstream media? Probably not. Because you didn't hear, look, people, you want to sit there and say, oh, the violence is the right, it's okay to use violence against neo-Nazis, okay? If they use violence against you, yeah. All right. But where were you when people were throwing rocks and bricks at people at demonstrations, or excuse me, at speaking engagements at Berkeley, Seattle? I have friends who went to a speaking engagement who were terrified because Antifa, a mob of black-clad, black-clothed, black masked people, okay, moving with military formation and precision, were shoving them around and threatening them, okay, trying to instigate violence. And nobody says anything? You got a Republican congressman, Steve Scalise, who's shot and wounded by a Bernie supporter? Where's your outcry on violence there? Does everyone cry out that that's all the left? No, they don't. When I talk about Antifa and I talk about these extremes, I've never suggested that all the left is like that and that that's what you get. But I'll tell you one thing. What I have done is called out on people on the left. You have to condemn that in the strongest possible terms. If you're at a demonstration and someone throws a brick, guess what? You have to cross the street to the other side and defend free speech, or form a new group and kick them out. If you don't have the courage to do that, don't go to the demonstration. Don't go. It's that simple. And this idea that only one side is guilty of violence because their ideas are worse, all right? And we can get into all that because, as I mentioned in my blog, this is the same struggle of the Weimar Republic. Sargon, I'll put a link to his video in there. It's very good on this too. Communists, Antifa, who hate everybody, by the way, including the liberals. Liberals, there's a bullet for you. They've said as much, okay? They are extreme international communists. Now, and the neo-Nazis are fascists, right? Racist fascists. So they're fighting each other. Guess who was fighting each other in Weimar, Germany? Yeah, communists, neo-Nazis. Uncertainty, depression, the punishment of Versailles sowed the seeds for this very fertile explosion of radical extreme movements, Nazism and the National Socialists and the Communists. And they warred with one another. And the rest of the nation looked on, and before they knew it, what was a street fight had become a struggle for the power of the nation, which the National Socialists won, and the rest is horrible history. So if we sit back and allow the extremes to dictate the terms of this conflict, what's going to happen is more and more people are going to start gravitating towards these two extremes, and you're going to be left with nothing. And why? Because you never bother to figure out that what they're arguing about isn't the fucking argument. Excuse my French. The argument is about whether or not we have the right and the system to protest freely, no matter how odious our ideas are, and whether or not law enforcement will enforce the one shared belief that we're all supposed to have. The one shared belief that is supposed to be our common ground on any situation is that everyone has a right to express their opinion, even offensive ones. And we empower law enforcement to enforce that particular agreed upon thing. That's their job, to protect and make sure that that is ensured, not to protect one side or the other. And similarly in Boston, as you'll see in the video, the people, okay, so these people who were there, pro-free speech, okay, some of them pro-Trump, but some of them not either. A guy that was there, he's a medic, and he came down, or a doctor, he came down to help people and say, look, free speech is right. They end up getting assaulted, spit at in the face, and then they're the ones who are asked to leave. And when they're asked to leave, they're marched by the police through a crowd of protesters, like some kind of march of shame. Rather than taken away from the situation, out of the situation in order to avoid inflaming conflict, they're marched through and shamed to suggest that if you show up on behalf of free speech, you're going to have to go through this, as some of the guys in the video think, this Cersei Lannister walk of shame ordeal. It's appalling. It's appalling and it's wrong, and no one should have to endure it. Even if you have shitty ideas, you should not be dragged through a crowd of people who hate you. All right? You should be separated and said, hey, you've got your ideas. I don't agree with them, but I agree with your right to do them. It's just going to be better if you do them over here and you guys do yours over there, because you guys clearly cannot get along because you're acting like children. That's what law enforcement's supposed to do. That's what they didn't do. It's what they haven't been doing. They've been stepping back in the name of politics and destabilizing the government. Now, you can get into whether it's a transfer of crises, so the Russia thing comes out not to be a deal. In other words, it's not physically possible to transfer files in a hacking situation, right, over the internet at the speed that these were clearly downloaded. There's studies, you probably haven't heard much about them, because, okay, and again, I'm not a Trump defender, okay? What I am is a defender of common sense, all right? And, you know, we're not being reasonable people. We're getting increasingly irrational. And people are thinking they have to pick sides, but it's the wrong side, as I say in my blog. You either choose law and order, or you choose chaos and barbarism. And you choose violence as a means of initiating problem resolution. Okay? Antifa's done it as much more so, in fact, currently, than the right has. Than even the neo-Nazis. And again, as deplorable as their goddamn ideas are, and they are deplorable and stupid, you have a right to be stupid in this country. You have a right to be an asshole in this country. You have a right to be wrong, to be horribly, horribly wrong in this country. And not get punched in the face for it. I mean, it's simple, but it's not easy. In fact, it's extremely difficult, extremely challenging, even though it's very simple. Now, again, people will talk about, regardless of, plots to undermine the president, which I do not entirely disbelieve, because, as I've said before in blogs, you know, Washington's been running itself through insiders and its own little deals for decades. And all of a sudden somebody comes in who's a genuine outsider, who's going to look at everything and go, what the hell have we been doing here? Okay? Who has access to all this stuff, they're freaking out. Because they don't have anything on him, right? If you got something on somebody, you can make them do it. Okay? You can't blindly support one side or the other. I've told you many times. You have to support truth. You have to. Not because they're evil people, but because people do evil things and selfish things, and it's normal. And it's a distraction from the real issue, which is the issue of free speech. And already you're seeing YouTube, Google, Facebook, they're already clamping down on ideas. Now, they can do that as independent companies. There's no question about that. But understand the precedent you're setting. Just understand it, because it may not be you now, but it will be you someday. Somebody, if you say that somebody in power can just decide that you don't get to say what you want to say, or you don't have free speech because they don't agree with your speech, where does it end? It doesn't. Now, you sit there and say slippery slope. Okay, and I know the slippery slope fallacy. But the problem is this, and this is a better way of putting it, and Jonah Goldberg does it really well. Slippery slope might not necessarily follow, but it sure as hell makes it a lot more likely that something will fall. So when you knock over one domino, you don't know, even if you lay them all out right. They might not all fall down if you set up dominoes, but the chances of them all falling down are increased dramatically when you knock over the first one. Undeniable, right? So this is the deal, people, okay? You're being inflamed into fear of neo-Nazis who are, as I said in my blog, maybe 0.03% of the population, something like that? I don't know. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. They're nothing. They're not a major threat. They're a fringe movement of idiots. Their ideas are not going to gain traction. Their ideas are waning. The vast majority of people reject them out of hand. They're not being taught in universities as valid ideas. There's no university in the country, no media outlet, that's spouting that stuff. It's not a danger. It's a fringe of resentful jackasses who have not learned to get over themselves, who are afraid and can't think clearly. And whatever concerns they may have about the erosion of Western civilization, concerns which you know I have, okay, have been clouded by the stupid ideology of how they explain it, which is by race and stupid shit like that. So, why take them seriously? Several articles have said the best thing to do with neo-Nazis is laugh at them, and it's true. The Blues Brothers, which came out around the time the Skokie decision even happened, making fun of them. That's the way to do it. But to excuse violence from one side, which is what the media is largely doing on the Antifa side, where were they? BLM led to a guy shooting a bunch of cops in Dallas. The cops being executed. Now again, you can agree with the ideology, but when it becomes violent, you must decry that violence unequivocally. Without qualification. And to do so is not to condone the views of one party or to condemn the ones of the other. You're condemning the violence. That's what you have to do, regardless. Now we're making excuses. Well, but they were inside, or they were... Now look, you don't punch first. You don't. And words are not punching. That's it. If you punch first, you're wrong, no matter what your ideology is. You've decided that you're okay being wrong. When you try and spin it and claim you had to do it, all right? Now, people will say, well, what about North Korea? There's a difference between saying a hateful idea. If someone comes up to you and says, I have a knife and I'm going to stab you in a minute, okay? That's imminent threat, right? That's not freedom of speech. That's a threat. That's incitement to violence. It's the violence itself. Okay, that's not protected speech. But if I say, even if I said that one race was superior to another, I'm not saying, hey, you of this race should go out and do violence to that other race. I'm saying something stupid and odious, but I'm not telling anyone to go hurt you. It's not an immediate threat. North Korea, if they say we got a nuke and we're pointed at Guam, we're going to shoot it. Okay. At some point, when someone says I'm going to stab you, you have to decide whether or not you think they're actually going to do it, and when is it okay to do it. I think it was Sticks X and I already talked about this, right? Are you going to wait till the knife's out of your pocket? Maybe it was Crowder. I don't know. You going to wait till the knife's out of your pocket, or are you going to? I mean, the knife's out of their pocket. Are you going to wait till you're stabbed? I mean, when are you going to do it, right? So it's a trickier issue, but it is an imminent threat, right? So therefore, it's different. We have to think clearly, and people's hatred of Trump is causing them to think even less clearly than Americans normally do. And I'm telling you right now, and Hard Bastard's clear on this video, if you normalize violence on one side of this problem, you are going to create problems you cannot even imagine. If you suggest that it's okay for one side to be violent, what's going to happen? And especially when that side does, as you'll see in Boston, brands anybody. At a point in that video, they're calling a black guy a Nazi. There was a black guy who showed up on the free speech side of the movement, and they tell him he's a Nazi. What? Okay, now, if you and that's just ideas, okay? Again, he has to take that. But if you are sitting there going, is it okay to punch a Nazi? And then you're going to say, yes, it is. And then you're going to say, we're going to determine who the Nazis are. Then you're making it okay for you to punch anybody. And if you make it okay for you to punch anybody, what do you think other people are going to do? People in response to that. You've now given them carte blanche. You've now made them heroes. This idea of comparing them to Allied soldiers for fighting fascism, okay, is the stupidest goddamn thing I've ever heard in my life, and I can't believe I have to respond to it. It is utterly absurd. Okay, a foreign power, aggressive power, and segments of your own population, misguided, by the way, tiny segments of your own population, within a society which privileges free speech, are not the same thing. They're not. Okay? Also, again, if they were attacked first, I mean physically attacked first, then yeah, you got to fight back. I've said that before. But you don't get to attack them just because they're carrying Nazi flags and torches. And believe me, I would want to punch them too, because it's stupid. But the difference here is we don't punch them. That's what Nazis do. That's what the Germans did. If you had different ideologies, if you had communist ideology, they punched you first and got rid of you. It was their plan. And the rest of the nation looked on and thought, oh God, we have to punch the communists too, or they're going to take us over. And they divided them up, and before they knew it, they'd lost their country. Because they made violence on one side of the spectrum okay. See? Because they didn't reject both sides and say, look, I don't give a crap what your ideology is. You're not going to beat the shit out of each other. You're not going to start violence to try and solve your problem. That's not how we work, because we're adults. And we're adults who are more interested in doing right than we are in being right. And it's high time we started acting like it. Don't get caught up in the bullshit two parties. The bullshit Nazi commie crap, because that's what it is. It's the same fight in Weimar Germany over again. And if we let them Shanghai the debate, the argument, and make it about that, everyone's going to gravitate to those two sides. And those two sides have both shown that they're willing to use violence. And if that's the case, if we don't commit ourselves to peaceful resolution of conflict, which is our one shared value, regardless of our political position, we're in for dark, dark times. So wake up, pick a side, civilization or chaos. Just understand, if you take either one of those two sides and endorse the violence on one side, you've chosen chaos over civilization. You're free to do that. It's a free country. Doesn't usually end well for civilizations that make that choice, that decide that they'd rather be right than do right. So, Check out the links. I encourage you. The videos are a bit long, but they're worth it. And the blogs are just more an articulation of what I just talked about. Remember, do right. It's a hell of a lot more meaningful than being right. Sorry to be somber, but serious issue, yeah? Thanks for watching. Cheers.